good morning, evening, or night. Wherever you are, welcome to WHAM Today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Thursday, 10th April, 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. China is embroiled in an escalating trade war with the United States, facing tariffs of up to 125% on its goods. In retaliation, China has imposed tariffs reaching 84% on U.S. products, a move orchestrated by the Ministry of Finance in Beijing. China denounces U.S. trade policies as violations of past agreements. Strategically, China is strengthening ties with neighboring countries, emphasizing supply chain integration, while simultaneously boosting its domestic economy through increased consumption and targeted investments. Microsoft's service cuts to a Chinese university and genomics firm illustrate the growing concerns around technological decoupling. Furthermore, China has issued travel warnings to its citizens regarding potential risks in the U.S.-Ukraine, claims to have identified at least 155 Chinese nationals fighting for Russia. The Ukrainian government alleges Beijing is ignoring their recruitment, claims which Beijing denies as totally unfounded. Domestically, a nursing home fire in Longhua County, Hebei Province, tragically resulted in 20 deaths. In scientific news, Chinese researchers have announced a breakthrough in metal materials. The U.S. has also cited China for financial networks enabling fentanyl trafficking. The United States, under President Trump, has escalated trade tensions with China, imposing tariffs of up to 125% on Chinese goods, though most other nations received a 90-day reprieve. The Trump administration accuses China of unfair trade practices, as defense officials pledge to deepen cooperation with Indo-Pacific partners. Simultaneously, the U.S. has voiced concerns over China's alleged role in facilitating fentanyl trafficking. Ukraine accuses China of ignoring the recruitment of its citizens to fight for Russia. President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that Ukraine has uncovered at least 155 Chinese nationals fighting for Russia and provided supporting documentation. Beijing has refuted these accusations. The European Union has raised billions for Central Asia to diversify supply chains and reduce reliance on China. Mexico, along with China, has been cited by the U.S. for its financial networks enabling fentanyl trafficking, with the Treasury Department noting their role in supporting the illegal opioid trade. United States, the Trump administration initiated and then paused a series of tariff measures impacting global trade. Initially, a 10% tariff was imposed on imports from numerous countries, including Australia, and higher levies were placed on goods from 57 larger trading partners. Plans to increase tariffs on most countries, except China, were later paused, boosting Wall Street and global markets. However, the tariff rate for China was authorized to increase to 125%, and a 104% tariff was imposed, sparking concerns about a trade war. Us soybean farmers feared market volatility and lost exports. Economic experts cautioned that the tariffs wouldn't incentivize us manufacturing due to instability. In response, the EU agreed to impose retaliatory tariffs of 25% on €21 billion of us goods, targeting farm produce and products from Republican states, with the first tariffs approved on items like jeans and motorcycles. Beyond trade, emergency food aid cuts were reversed for several nations, but maintained in Afghanistan and Yemen. Trump ordered investigations into whistleblower Miles Taylor and Cybersecurity Director Chris Krebs for refuting election fraud claims. The U.S. State Department expressed alarm over the arrest of American academic Paul Chambers in Thailand for alleged royal defamation. The U.S. military aims to boost joint operations training in the Pacific amidst rising tensions and is exploring ways to counter China's shipyards. Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth suggested the U.S. could revive bases in Panama to secure the canal, but stated the U.S. is not seeking war with China. Trump stated he'd consider using the U.S. military to stop Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons, potentially with Israel leading such a strike. A House bill is advancing that restricts US-China university partnerships, potentially cutting Homeland Security funding for schools with ties to certain Chinese institutions. The U.S. is decoupling from China in the war on cancer, denying access to research data banks. Chinese diplomats have increased diplomatic pressure on Africa, including threatening to cancel a summit, to pressure lawmakers to quit an international parliamentary group critical of China. Australia is declining China's invitation to unite against Trump's tariffs, with Defence Minister Richard Marles stating that Canberra wants to diversify its trade. Chinese exporters are reportedly diverting shipments mid-voyage to avoid Trump's tariffs, leading to a significant drop in US-bound container volume for some companies. Samsung denies halting foundry services for Chinese clients amid US pressure in the chip war. China is more worried that the trade war will cause goods to become too cheap as American demand declines, forcing Chinese producers to compete more fiercely. TikTok Shop is increasing efforts to recruit cross-border merchants for European markets, as Trump triples tariffs on small parcels in the U.S. Analysts suggest Beijing's ties with the developing world will be tested as Washington may push countries to take a tougher stance on China. New Delhi and Beijing have an opportunity to lead in humanitarian relief for Myanmar, which is struggling to receive aid. Australian shares are expected to rise significantly following Donald Trump's pause on oversized tariffs against most nations. Futures prices suggest an increase exceeding 6% for the S&P ASX 200, pushing the index above 1850 points. The Australian stock market is experiencing a surge due to Donald Trump's pause on steep tariffs against most nations, even though the situation between Australia and the world's two largest economies remains complex. Australia is declining China's invitation to unite against Trump's tariffs, with Defence Minister Richard Marles stating that Canberra wants to diversify its trade. Australia's donation of drones aims to help boost the Philippines' maritime needs amid rising tensions in the South China Sea. Anthony Albanese is focused on the upcoming federal election on May 30. Households in the poorest outer suburban electorates will benefit most from the Albanese government's social welfare and tax policies, with an average boost of $1,672 in 2025, according to ANU research, while the wealthiest households will be nearly $800 worse off. Virgin Australia is refunding over 60,000 passengers after an internal error caused inflated itinerary change fees over the past 5 years, with an average refund value of $55. The airline has apologized and launched an itinerary change claim program for customers affected between April 21st, 2020 and March 31 this year. A coalition proposal to limit renewable energy rollout to 54% could hold at least $58 billion in private investment and billions in community spending, according to a Clean Energy Council (CC) analysis. Green Energy Markets conducted the estimation on behalf of the CK. Mitchell Fuller, a Melbourne lawyer, lost his bid to regain his job after being fired for taking a sick day to attend the AFL Gather Round in South Australia. The Fair Work Commission ruled his dismissal was justified, citing his own social media posts as evidence he was fit for work. European Union. Now, the EU has agreed to impose retaliatory tariffs of 25% on €21 billion of US goods, targeting farm products from Republican states in response to Donald Trump's tariffs. The tariffs will be introduced in phases, starting April 15th. The EU approved first retaliatory tariffs on US imports, including levies on items such as jeans and motorcycles. The EU is planning to invest €20 billion in building AI gigafactories to catch up with the US and China in artificial intelligence development, with up to 5 sites planned, featuring supercomputers and data centers. As tariffs on EU exports escalate, Europe is scrambling for a unified response. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian stated that the country is not after a nuclear bomb ahead of indirect US-Iran talks. Iran's president has pledged that his nation is not after a nuclear bomb and suggested the prospect of direct American investment if a deal can be reached with the US. Yemen. Houthi rebels have claimed responsibility for shooting down a US MQ-9 Reaper drone over Yemen's Al-Jaf, with images showing wreckage. Thailand. A US scholar has been jailed in Thailand on charges of insulting the monarchy and later released on bail. The US State Department is alarmed by the arrest of American academic Paul Chambers in Thailand for alleged royal defamation. Colombia. A judge in the US has given the government 24 hours to justify the planned deportation of Columbia University student Mahmoud Khalil. Myanmar. With Myanmar struggling to receive aid, New Delhi and Beijing have an opportunity to lead in humanitarian relief. Technology companies Amazon, Google, Microsoft. Amazon, Google, and Microsoft are constructing and operating data centers in water-scarce regions across 5 continents, potentially impacting local populations already facing water scarcity, according to findings by Source Material and The Guardian. These technology giants are planning hundreds of data centers globally with support from Donald Trump. United Kingdom. The UK is co-hosting a global conference in London on April 15th, bringing together foreign ministers from nearly 20 countries and organizations to address the humanitarian crisis and civil war in Sudan. The conference aims to pressure warring factions towards a ceasefire on the 2nd anniversary of the conflict, which has resulted in the displacement of 11 million people and left half of Sudan's population facing food shortages. Separately, Hamas has submitted a legal filing to the UK government requesting removal from the list of proscribed terrorist groups, arguing it is a resistance movement focused on liberating Palestine and confronting Zionism, not a threat to Britain, despite their deadly attacks on Israel on October 7, 2023. The Institute for Government, IFG, is urging UK ministers to adopt an annual migration plan to address incoherent policies on work visas, criticizing successive governments for implementing reactive, knee-jerk policies. Amid increasing global trade war pressures, the British government is considering nationalizing the last UK plant, making steel from raw materials to secure domestic steel supply. Universal Studios is planning to build its first European theme park in the UK, located north of London, featuring attractions based on franchises like Harry Potter, Shrek, and the Minions. UK cinemas are urging audiences to stop throwing popcorn during screenings of a Minecraft movie due to a disruptive TikTok trend known as chicken jockey. Trump's tariff policies are pushing the UK and EU closer to finalizing defense, security, and youth visa agreements during a summit in London on May 19. King Charles and Queen Camilla made a surprise visit to Pope Francis at the Vatican, who is recovering from a recent hospital stay. Turning to Ukraine, the country is claiming that over 150 Chinese mercenaries are fighting for Russia in Ukraine. This claim has been denied by Beijing, with a Beijing official dismissing it as totally unfounded, while President Zelensky's assertion has reportedly embarrassed Beijing. Beijing has advised its citizens to stay away from war zones. Despite US-led ceasefire negotiations, Ukrainian soldiers on the front lines express little hope for peace amid ongoing Russian advances. Ukraine is also sending a delegation to Washington to revive a mineral deal with the USI. Regarding Sudan, the humanitarian crisis and civil war, which has displaced 11 million people and left half of Sudan's population short of food, will be addressed at a global conference in London on April 15th, co-hosted by the UK team. The conference aims to pressure warring factions towards a ceasefire on the second anniversary of the conflict. Dominican Republic was struck by tragedy when a roof collapse at the Jet Set nightclub in Santo Domingo claimed 184 lives. The victims tragically included merengue singer Ruby Perez and former MLB players Octavio Dotel and Tony Blanco. The incident occurred mid-concert at the 50-year-old venue. First, dust began falling, causing panic among those in attendance, including musicians, athletes, and government officials. A large-scale rescue operation ensued, utilizing heavy machinery and drones. Search efforts have been called off, and families have gathered at the site and the Dominican Republic's Forensic Institute, awaiting news. Former MLB player Pedro Martinez reported that he had family members still missing in the aftermath. Germany's political landscape has shifted as the CDU, CSU, and SPD successfully coalesced into a coalition government, averting potential political instability. Friedrich Merz is expected to assume the role of Chancellor. He intends to project a strong, effective government and has committed to increasing defense expenditure, citing concerns over Russia and perceived unreliability of the U.S. The coalition seeks to revitalize economic growth amid fears of US tariffs. Meanwhile, Bosnian Serbs have declared German Secretary of State Anna Lerman persona non grata, following German sanctions against their leadership. Turning to the European Union, pharmaceutical companies are expressing worry over potential risk of exodus to the United States. This concern stems from Donald Trump's revived threat of tariffs on US drug imports, which has already contributed to stock market declines within the pharmaceutical sector across the globe. Global markets have been turbulent following the introduction of new tariffs. Japan's Nikkei 225 index notably fell by over 5% initially. However, the Hang Seng index later rallied, reflecting broader gains in Asian stock markets. This followed former President Trump's announcement to temporarily suspend most tariffs. The tariff pause provided relief to many U.S. consumers who frequent Asian supermarkets and had concerns about rising grocery costs. China and the European Union are now considering deeper economic and trade collaboration as a way to offset the impact of U.S. tariffs. China's Commerce Minister Wang Ao and European Trade Commissioner Maros Sefcovic have discussed possible trade relief measures and commitments regarding electric vehicle pricing policies. King Charles III and Queen Camilla recently concluded a 4-day state visit to Italy, highlighted by a private audience with Pope Francis at the Vatican, where they offered wishes for his swift recovery from pneumonia and coincidentally celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. Meanwhile, the Italian luxury furniture industry is grappling with the impact of tariffs previously imposed by the Trump administration, creating economic headwinds for the sector. This event is excluded as it involves a private individual with no clear geopolitical, economic, or policy impact. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.